England, 1863. The crystal chandelier cast a golden glow across the drawing room of Everley House, illuminating the tense faces of those gathered below. Lady Violet Everley stood rigid before the fireplace, her slender fingers gripping the mantelpiece as her father's words echoed through the room. "It is decided, Violet. The papers have been signed. You shall wed the Duke of Ravencrest by month's end." Violet turned slowly, her emerald eyes finding her father's weathered face. Lord William Everley, the Earl of Harrington, would not meet her gaze. His attention fixed instead on the amber liquid swirling in his glass. "Father, I implore you to reconsider," Violet said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. "I have never even conversed with Lord Ashcombe beyond the most perfunctory of greetings." "Which is precisely why you shall have a proper introduction tomorrow," her mother interjected, sweeping into the room in a rustle of sapphire silk. Lady Eleanor Everley, once celebrated as the most beautiful debutante of her season, now wore her beauty like armor. "The Duke has accepted our invitation to tea." "I have heard the whispers, Mother," Violet said. "They call him the Duke of Ice. They say his heart froze years ago." Lady Eleanor's lips thinned. "Titles and fortune do not require warmth, my dear. The Ashcombe estates are vast, their coffers deep, and our family's position—" She hesitated, exchanging a meaningful look with her husband. Violet understood the unspoken truth. The Everley fortune had dwindled. Their country estate in Hampshire was mortgaged to its ancient rafters. This marriage would save them from financial ruin. "Our position," Lord Everley said gruffly, "would be secured for generations to come." Violet turned toward the window, gazing out at the evening fog creeping across Berkeley Square. At 24, she had long resigned herself to spinsterhood after rejecting a string of suitors who had sought her hand, or rather, the presumed Everley fortune. She had dreamed of a different life, one filled with purpose beyond hosting dinner parties and producing heirs. "And what of love, Father?" she asked softly. Lord Everley placed his empty glass on the side table with a decisive clink. "Love is a luxury we cannot afford, my dear. I suggest you put such notions aside." As twilight descended over London, miles away in the sombre grandeur of Ravencrest House, Lord Henry Ashcombe, the 6th Duke of Ravencrest, stood in his study, a letter crumpled in his fist. "You cannot be serious, Uncle," Henry said, his voice cutting through the silence. "An arranged marriage? We live in modern times." Lord Richard Ashcombe, his father's younger brother and his most trusted advisor since his parents' untimely death 15 years prior, looked up from the leather armchair by the fire. "Modern times still require heirs, Henry. You are 31 years old. The dukedom cannot continue without succession." Henry strode to the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the glass. The ghosts of his past seemed to whisper from the shadows of the room, particularly one ghost with golden hair and a smile that had once promised forever before betraying him for another man with deeper pockets. "I have fulfilled every obligation placed upon my shoulders since inheriting the title," Henry said. "I have restored the family finances, expanded our holdings, and ensured our tenants are properly cared for. Is that not enough?" "No, it is not," his uncle replied simply. "The Everley girl comes from good stock. Her bloodline is impeccable, even if her family's finances are not." Henry turned, his dark eyes narrowing. "So that's it. They seek our fortune, and we seek their name. Do not be so cynical. I met the girl at Lady Harrington's musicale last season. She possesses a sharp mind and uncommon sense, qualities that would serve the future Duchess of Ravencrest well. I care not if she possesses the wisdom of Solomon," Henry replied coldly. "I have no interest in a wife." "Nevertheless," Lord Richard said, rising to his feet, "you shall have one. I have already given your word to Earl Harrington." Henry's jaw tightened, but he did not argue further. A lifetime of duty had taught him the futility of resistance. The dukedom always came first, his personal wishes a distant second. "Very well," he said at last. "But make no mistake, Uncle. This shall be a marriage in name only. Lady Violet Everley may claim my title and my protection, but she shall never claim my heart." The following afternoon, Violet sat in the drawing room, her back straight as a poker, watching the ornate clock tick away the minutes. Her lady's maid, Betsy, had dressed her in a gown of deep burgundy that complemented her chestnut hair, which was styled in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck. "His Grace the Duke of Ravencrest," announced Simmons, the Everleigh butler, his voice reverberating through the room. The man who entered seemed to bring winter with him. Tall and imposing, with broad shoulders and raven-black hair, Lord Henry Ashcombe moved with the fluid grace of a predator. His face might have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and austere planes. But it was his eyes that captured Violet's attention, dark as midnight and utterly devoid of warmth. The Duke bowed precisely, the movement elegant yet mechanical. "Lady Violet, Lord and Lady Harrington, you have my gratitude for your invitation." Violet rose and curtsied, studying him carefully. She had glimpsed him from afar at various society events, but proximity revealed details previously hidden: the slight scar above his right eyebrow, the tenseness around his mouth, the way he held himself as if perpetually braced for attack. "Your Grace," she murmured. "It is an honor to receive you in our home." For a fleeting moment their eyes met, and Violet felt a curious sensation as if the floor beneath her feet had suddenly tilted. Then the moment passed, and the Duke's expression resumed its mask of polite indifference. As tea was served and pleasantries exchanged, Violet observed how skillfully Lord Ashcombe navigated conversation while revealing nothing of himself. He spoke of the season's weather, of Parliament's recent session, of the agricultural improvements on his estates, all with perfect civility and absolute emotional distance. "Perhaps," Lady Eleanor suggested with transparent artifice, "Lady Violet might show you the conservatory, Your Grace. Her collection of exotic orchids is quite remarkable." Violet suppressed a sigh at her mother's transparent attempt at matchmaking, but rose obediently. "If it would interest Your Grace?" The Duke inclined his head. "I should be delighted." They walked in silence through the corridor, Violet acutely aware of the tall figure beside her. The conservatory was Violet's sanctuary, a glass haven filled with plants collected from around the world, a gift from her father, in more prosperous days. "Your mother's subtlety rivals that of a charging rhinoceros," the Duke remarked unexpectedly as the conservatory door closed behind them. Violet's head snapped up in surprise, a startled laugh escaping before she could suppress it. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace." A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, crossed his face before vanishing. "I merely observe that Lady Harrington seems eager to see us acquainted. Given the circumstances, can you blame her?" Violet countered, abandoning pretense. "We are to be wed within a month, yet we are strangers to one another." The Duke stilled, his gaze sharpening. "So you speak plainly, Lady Violet. I find dissembling tiresome, Your Grace. We both know why this marriage has been arranged. My family needs your fortune, and you require—" She hesitated. "An heir," he finished flatly. "The continuation of the Ashcombe line." Violet turned away, moving among her beloved plants, her fingers trailing over a delicate fern. A coldly practical arrangement. "Most marriages among our class are nothing more," he replied. "At least we harbor no illusions about love." The bitterness in his tone caught Violet's attention. She looked back at him, noting how the afternoon light through the glass ceiling cast shadows across his face, emphasizing its hardness. "You sound as if you speak from experience, Your Grace." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "My experiences are not for discussion, Lady Violet. However, I believe in honesty between marriage partners, limited though our interactions may be. I shall provide for you generously. You shall want for nothing material. In return, I expect loyalty, discretion, and eventually an heir. Beyond that, we need not intrude upon each other's lives." Violet felt a chill that had nothing to do with the conservatory's temperature. "You describe not a marriage, but a business transaction. Is it not?" He gestured between them. "Your family's ancient name for my gold sovereigns." Anger flared within Violet's chest. "And what of companionship? Mutual respect? Perhaps even affection in time?" "I have no need for such sentiments," he replied coldly. "Nor do I have the capacity for them." "Everyone has the capacity for feeling, Your Grace," Violet said quietly. "Even you." The Duke's expression hardened further. "You know nothing of me, Lady Violet." "I know you were once called Henry," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "Before titles and tragedy shaped you into this fortress of a man." His eyes widened fractionally, the first genuine reaction she had seen from him. For a breathless moment, Violet thought she had gone too far. Then, unexpectedly, he offered his arm. "Shall we return to your parents, Lady Violet? I believe we understand each other well enough for one afternoon." As they walked back in silence, Violet sensed the walls between them solidifying, yet something in his reaction gave her pause. The Duke of Ice had, for the briefest moment, shown a crack in his frozen facade, and Violet Everly had never been one to ignore a challenge. The wedding of the Duke of Ravencrest to Lady Violet Everly was the most anticipated event of the season. St. George's Church in Hanover Square overflowed with London's elite, all eager to witness the union of one of England's most powerful dukes to the daughter of the impoverished Earl of Harrington. Violet stood in the antechamber, her white satin gown catching the light from the stained glass windows. Her cousin, Lady Caroline Beaumont, adjusted the lace veil over Violet's carefully arranged curls. "You look absolutely breathtaking," Caroline whispered, her blue eyes bright with unshed tears, "though I must confess I still cannot believe you are marrying the Duke of Ice." "Caroline!" Violet admonished, though there was no real reproach in her tone. Caroline had been her closest confidant since childhood, the sister she had never had. "Well, it's what everyone calls him," Caroline defended herself, adjusting a pearl pin in Violet's hair. "They say the last time he smiled was during the Great Exhibition of '51. Despite her nerves, Violet laughed. "Perhaps he simply requires a reason to smile." Caroline's expression grew serious. "Do you truly believe you can thaw his heart, Vi?" Violet looked down at her bouquet of white roses and lavender. "I do not know," she answered honestly, "but I intend to create a life of meaning, regardless. The Duke may not desire my companionship, but he shall have my respect, and I shall demand his in return." The organ music swelled, signaling it was time. Lord Everly appeared at the door, resplendent in his formal attire, though Violet noted the new lines of worry etched around his eyes. "You are a vision, my girl," he said gruffly, offering his arm. "The spitting image of your grandmother, the First Lady Harrington. She would be proud." Violet swallowed the lump in her throat. "Are you proud, Father?" His expression softened. "More than you know. You are saving our family, Violet. I only wish the price was not so dear." "Perhaps it will not be as terrible as we fear," she said, though her heart fluttered like a caged bird. The church fell silent as Violet walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Through her veil, she could see the tall, rigid figure of her betrothed waiting at the altar, his expression inscrutable as ever. The ceremony passed in a blur of ancient vows and solemn promises. When the Duke slipped the gold band onto her finger, an Ashcombe family heirloom set with diamonds and sapphires, his touch was cool and impersonal. Not once during the service did he look directly into her eyes. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the bishop declared. "Your Grace, you may kiss your bride." A hush fell over the congregation. Violet held her breath as the Duke lifted her veil with careful precision. His dark eyes met hers for the first time that day, and she was startled by the flash of vulnerability she glimpsed before his mask slipped back into place. His lips brushed against hers in the briefest of contacts, a kiss that fulfilled the letter of tradition while remaining utterly devoid of passion. The wedding breakfast at Ravencrest House was an elaborate affair, with hundreds of guests milling through the grand ballroom and adjoining gardens. Violet moved among them, accepting congratulations with a gracious smile that concealed her growing apprehension. Her husband remained distant throughout, performing his duties as host with perfect correctness and nothing more. Violet noticed how he skillfully avoided being alone with her, always ensuring at least one other person remained in conversation with them. As evening approached, guests began to depart. Violet retreated to the Duchess's chambers, her chambers now, where Betsy helped her change from her wedding gown into a nightdress of finest silk, covered by a matching robe. "Shall I wait to help you with your hair, Your Grace?" Betsy asked, still stumbling over the new title. "No, Betsy," Violet replied, her fingers nervously tracing the embroidered pattern on her sleeve. "You may retire. I shall manage." After Betsy departed, Violet paced the opulent room, taking in details she had missed earlier. The canopied bed with its blue silk hangings, the delicate Aubusson carpet, the silver-framed miniatures arranged on the mantelpiece. She picked up one such frame, studying the portrait of a handsome couple, the Duke's parents, she presumed. The woman had Henry's high cheekbones and proud bearing, while the man shared his strong jaw and penetrating gaze. "The fifth Duke and Duchess," came a deep voice from the doorway, "taken 2 years before their deaths." Violet started, nearly dropping the frame. She had not heard the door open. Her husband stood on the threshold, still in his wedding clothes, though he had removed his cravat and unfastened his collar. "They look very much in love," she observed, carefully replacing the portrait. "They were," he replied, entering the room and closing the door behind him. "Theirs was a love match, unusual for our station." "How did they die?" Violet asked softly, noting the shadow that crossed his face. "A carriage accident on the road to Scotland." His tone brooked no further questions. "I was 16. Violet's heart clenched. "I am sorry. It was long ago." He moved to the sideboard, pouring amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. He offered one to Violet. "Brandy. I thought you might need it." She accepted the glass, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Thank you." An awkward silence stretched between them. Henry, she must accustom herself to thinking of him by his given name now, stood by the fireplace, seemingly fascinated by the dancing flames. "I have had rooms prepared for you in the East Wing," he said abruptly. "They have excellent light for reading or painting, whichever you prefer." Violet stared at him in confusion. "The East Wing? But surely—" "Our arrangement need not include sharing chambers," he interrupted, his voice devoid of emotion. "As I explained previously, I have no interest in the sentimental aspects of marriage." "But what of an heir?" Violet asked, heat rising to her cheeks at her own boldness. "You spoke of continuing the Ashcombe line." Something flashed in his eyes. Discomfort, perhaps. "That matter can be addressed clinically when the time comes. For now, I believe separate chambers will suit us best." Violet set down her untouched brandy with a decisive click. "I see. And have I no say in this arrangement, Your Grace?" He frowned. "You object?" "I object to being dismissed like an unwanted parcel," she replied, her temper flaring. "I may have entered this marriage out of duty, but I did so expecting to be treated as a wife, not an inconvenience to be tucked away in the East Wing." "I am trying to be considerate," he said stiffly. "Most women of your station would be relieved." "I am not most women," Violet interrupted. "And if we are to build any sort of life together, however limited, we must establish mutual respect. That begins with consulting me about decisions that affect us both." Henry stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. The firelight cast half his face in shadow, the other half illuminated in gold. For a moment, Violet thought she glimpsed a crack in his icy composure. Surprise, perhaps even admiration. Then his expression closed again, though less severely than before. "Very well, Duchess. What do you propose?" The title, her new title, momentarily took Violet aback. She gathered her courage and spoke from her heart. "I propose we attempt to forge a partnership built on honesty, if nothing else. I do not expect love, Henry, but I would hope for friendship in time." "Friendship," he repeated, as if testing a foreign word on his tongue. "Yes, beginning with proper chambers for the Duchess adjoining your own, with a connecting door that either of us may choose to lock or unlock as we wish." Henry considered her words, swirling the brandy in his glass. "You are unlike any woman I have encountered, Violet Everly." "Ashcombe," she corrected gently. "I am Violet Ashcombe now." Something indefinable crossed his features. Possession, perhaps. "So you are." He drained his glass and set it aside. "Very well. I shall have your belongings moved to the Duchess's proper chambers tomorrow. Tonight you may remain here, and I—" He paused, seemingly at a loss. "Will sleep elsewhere," Violet finished for him, understanding that he needed time. "But tomorrow we begin as we mean to go on, as partners in this endeavor, whatever it may become." Henry nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. He moved toward the door, then hesitated. "Good night, Duchess." "Good night, Henry," she replied softly. After he left, Violet gazed into the fire, turning her wedding ring around her finger. The Duke of Ice might believe himself incapable of feeling, but Violet had glimpsed something beneath the frost, embers that might yet be coaxed to flame. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of changes. Violet found herself mistress of a vast household that included not only the London mansion, but also Ashcroft Abbey, the Ashcombe ancestral seat in Derbyshire, and a hunting lodge in Scotland. Mrs. Graves, the Ravencrest housekeeper, a formidable woman who had served the family for 30 years, presented Violet with household ledgers, staff rotations, and menu plans, watching closely to see how the new Duchess would respond. "I understand you have managed these houses splendidly for many years, Mrs. Graves," Violet said. after reviewing the immaculate records. "I see no reason to disrupt systems that function so well. However, I would appreciate your guidance in learning the particular traditions of the Ashcombe family." The housekeeper's severe expression softened marginally. "Very good, Your Grace. The late Duchess was most particular about certain observances. I should be pleased to acquaint you with them." Violet's days settled into a rhythm. Mornings were spent with Mrs. Graves and the butler, Mr. Phillips, addressing household matters. Afternoons she often passed in the library, familiarizing herself with the estate records and the family history. Of her husband she saw little. Henry rose before dawn each day, attended to business in the city, and often returned late. They dined together when he was home, exchanging polite conversation about inconsequential matters. Sometimes he would join her in the library in the evenings, reading silently across from her, before retiring to his chambers with a formal good night. The connecting door between their rooms remained closed, though not locked, a silent acknowledgement of the tenuous truce between them. One evening, nearly a month after their wedding, Violet was startled to find Henry in the music room, seated at the pianoforte, his fingers moving across the keys with surprising skill. The melancholy strains of Beethoven filled the air. She paused in the doorway, reluctant to interrupt. In this unguarded moment, his face had shed its usual rigidity, revealing a man capable of deep feeling. Henry looked up suddenly, his hands stilling on the keys. "Forgive me, I did not hear you enter." "Please don't stop on my account," Violet said quickly. "I had no idea you played." A shadow crossed his face. "My mother taught me. After she died, I rarely touched the instrument. Tonight I found myself—" He trailed off, seeming unable to explain. Violet moved into the room, drawn by this glimpse of his inner world. "The music suits you," she said softly, passionate beneath a controlled exterior. His eyes flashed to hers, startled by her perception. "You see too much, Duchess." "Perhaps you conceal too much, Duke," she countered gently. A silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken thoughts. Then Henry's hands returned to the keys, beginning a new piece, slower, more contemplative. "Chopin," Violet identified, moving to stand beside the instrument. "My father's favorite." Henry nodded, his focus on the music. "You play as well?" "Poorly," she admitted with a small smile. "My talents lie elsewhere." "Your orchids," he remembered, glancing up briefly. "You must miss your conservatory." The comment surprised her. She had not realized he had paid such attention during their brief meeting before the wedding. "I do," she acknowledged. Henry continued playing, his expression thoughtful. "The south wing at Ashcroft Abbey has an excellent conservatory, though it has been neglected in recent years. Perhaps when we visit next month you might consider restoring it." Violet's heart leapt at the unexpected gesture. "I should like that very much." He completed the piece, the final notes lingering in the air between them. When he looked up, his customary reserve had returned, though perhaps not quite as impenetrable as before. "I am hosting a dinner tomorrow evening," he said, rising from the bench. "Several members of Parliament and their wives. Your presence would be appreciated." It was not a romantic declaration, but coming from Henry, it felt like a significant overture. "I shall be there," Violet promised. He nodded, hesitating as if wanting to say more. Instead, he bowed slightly. "Good night, Violet." It was the first time he had used her given name without prompting. "Good night, Henry," she replied, watching as he departed. Alone in the music room, Violet smiled to herself. The ice was beginning to crack, ever so slightly. The dinner party the following evening proved illuminating. Violet observed how skillfully Henry navigated political discussions, his opinions respected, even by those who disagreed with him. She noted with interest that while his public persona remained aloof, he demonstrated genuine concern for issues affecting the common people, factory conditions, child welfare and agricultural reforms. "Your husband is quite the reformer," remarked Lady Abigail Woodridge, wife of the Foreign Secretary, as they took tea in the drawing-room while the men remained at table with their port. "Not what one would expect from a man of his reputation." "His reputation?" Violet inquired innocently, though she knew precisely what the woman meant. Lady Woodridge lowered her voice. "They call him the Duke of Ice, my dear, so cold and unapproachable. Yet here he is, passionately advocating for the Factory Acts. Most curious." "Perhaps," Violet suggested, People are more complex than the reputation society assigns them. Later that night, as Violet prepared for bed, a soft knock came at the connecting door. Her heart quickening, she crossed the room and opened it. Henry stood on the threshold in his dressing gown, his hair slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it. "Forgive the intrusion," he said formally. "I wish to thank you for your assistance this evening. Lady Woodridge can be challenging." Violet smiled. "She was quite taken with you, actually. Your views on the Factory Acts impressed her greatly." A faint frown creased his brow. "You sound surprised." "Not surprised, exactly," Violet replied carefully. "But I am learning there is more to the Duke of Ravencrest than meets the eye." He studied her face, his dark eyes unreadable. "As there is more to the Duchess than I initially perceived." The admission, small though it was, warmed Violet. "Perhaps we might both benefit from looking beyond first impressions." "Perhaps," he conceded, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. He took a step back, his posture stiffening. "Good night, Violet." "Henry," she called softly as he turned to go, "the door shall remain unlocked on my side." He stilled, his back to her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded before disappearing into his own chamber. Violet closed the door but did not turn the key. A small step, but a beginning nonetheless. Ashcroft Abbey rose from the mist-shrouded hills of Derbyshire, like something from a medieval tale. A sprawling stone edifice of towers and gables, its windows gleaming in the autumn sunlight. As the carriage wound up the long drive flanked by ancient oaks, Violet felt a curious mixture of apprehension and anticipation. This was the true heart of the Ashcombe legacy, the place where generations of dukes had been born, lived and died. "It's magnificent," she breathed, gazing out the carriage window. Beside her, Henry watched her reaction carefully. "It can be rather overwhelming at first," he admitted. "When I was a boy, I used to get lost in the East Wing corridors." The small personal revelation, offered voluntarily, made Violet smile. During their journey from London, Henry had gradually relaxed his rigid formality, occasionally sharing anecdotes about the countryside they passed through, or asking thoughtful questions about her interests. "How many rooms does it have?" she asked. 64, excluding servants' quarters and outbuildings," he replied, "though not all are in use. The north wing was closed after a fire in my grandfather's time." As the carriage pulled into the cobblestone courtyard, Violet noted the row of servants assembled to greet them, nearly twice the number employed at Ravencrest House in London. "They seem eager to meet their new mistress," she observed nervously. Henry's expression softened slightly. "They have heard much about you. My steward, Mr. Bradford, writes that your reputation for kindness preceded you." "My reputation?" Violet echoed, surprised. "Your work with the orphanage near Berkeley Square," Henry explained, "and your efforts to improve conditions for the seamstresses employed by your mother's friends." Violet blushed. "I was not aware you knew of such things." "I make it my business to know all I can about matters of importance," he replied, his dark eyes holding hers for a meaningful moment before he exited the carriage and offered his hand to assist her. The housekeeper, Mrs. Wilson, a motherly woman whose warm smile belied her efficient manner, showed Violet to the Duchess's chambers, a suite of rooms overlooking the formal gardens. "These were redecorated for the late Duchess, Your Grace," Mrs. Wilson explained, "though His Grace ordered some changes made before your arrival." Violet noted the fresh flowers, the new silk hangings in her favorite shade of green, and most surprisingly, a small writing desk positioned perfectly to capture the morning light, an exact replica of the one she had often used in her father's house. "His Grace had it made specially," Mrs. Wilson said, following Violet's gaze. "Said you mentioned once how you missed your old desk." Violet's breath caught. She had indeed mentioned it in passing, during one of their quiet evenings in the library. A brief comment she had not expected him to remember, much less act upon. That evening, Henry personally escorted Violet on a tour of the Abbey, moving from the grand public rooms with their ancestral portraits and priceless artwork to the cozier family spaces rarely seen by visitors. "And this," he said, opening a set of ornate double doors, "is the library." Violet gasped. The room was spectacular, 2 stories tall with a gallery running around the upper level, every wall lined with books from floor to ceiling. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, while tall windows overlooked the western gardens. "It's the finest private library in Derbyshire," Henry said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Nearly 15,000 volumes, collected over 3 centuries. Violet moved along the shelves, trailing her fingers over leather-bound spines. "This is extraordinary, Henry. I thought you might appreciate it," he replied, watching her exploration with something akin to pleasure. "The botanical collection is particularly extensive, my great-grandfather's passion." He led her to a section where dozens of volumes on plants and horticulture stood in neat rows. Violet withdrew one, a magnificent illustrated compendium of exotic flora, and opened it reverently. "These illustrations are exquisite," she murmured. "Like you," Henry said softly, then looked startled at his own words. Violet glanced up, her cheeks warming at the unexpected compliment. For a breathless moment, something sparked between them, a connection that transcended their careful formality. Henry cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "There is one more place I wish to show you." He led her through a series of corridors to a glass-walled structure extending from the south wing. As promised, it was a conservatory, grander than the one at Everley House, though now sadly neglected. Dead leaves littered the stone floor, and empty planters stood in forlorn rows. "It requires considerable work," Henry acknowledged, "but the heating system remains functional and the glass was recently repaired. I thought perhaps—" He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "It's perfect," Violet said earnestly, already envisioning how it could be transformed. "Thank you, Henry." He nodded, pleased by her reaction. "I shall instruct Bradford to provide whatever you require for its restoration." As they walked back through the house, Violet noticed a corridor whose entrance was concealed by a heavy velvet curtain. "What lies beyond there?" she inquired. Henry's expression darkened immediately. "The north wing. It is not in use, as I mentioned. Because of the fire." "Among other reasons," he replied curtly. "Come, dinner will be served shortly." His sudden shift in demeanor puzzled Violet, but she did not press the matter. Henry had been making such progress in opening up to her, she would not risk setting them back by prying into matters he clearly wished to avoid. The next morning, Violet woke to find Henry had already departed for an early inspection of the tenant farms with Bradford. After breakfast, she set about familiarizing herself with the household, meeting with the cook to discuss menus and reviewing the staffing arrangements with Mrs. Wilson. "There's a village girl asking to see you, Your Grace," Mrs. Wilson informed her as they concluded their meeting. "A Miss Lucy Caldwell says she's the daughter of the local schoolmaster." Curious, Violet received the young woman in the morning room. Lucy Caldwell proved to be a forthright girl of about 19, with intelligent eyes and a determined set to her chin. "Thank you for seeing me, Your Grace," she said, curtsying nervously. "I've come about the village school." "Please sit down," Violet invited. "How may I help?" Lucy explained that the school building was in desperate need of repairs before winter. "The roof leaks something terrible, and the cold wind cuts right through the walls. The little ones suffer so in winter, they can hardly hold their slates for shivering." "Surely the estate oversees such matters?" Violet asked, frowning. "It always did, Your Grace, in the old Duke's time," Lucy confirmed. "But since—" She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Please speak freely," Violet encouraged. "Since His Grace returned from London 5 years ago, he's kept to himself, mostly. Mr. Bradford handles estate matters, and while he's fair with rents and such, improvements to the village have fallen by the wayside." Violet found this curious, given Henry's evident concern for social reforms in Parliament. 5 years ago, you say? What happened then?" Lucy's eyes widened. "Oh, I couldn't say, Your Grace. It's not my place to gossip about His Grace's affairs." But her reaction confirmed Violet's growing suspicion that something significant had occurred around that time, something that had perhaps contributed to Henry's withdrawn nature. "I understand," Violet assured her. "Regarding the school, I shall speak with the Duke. I'm certain he would wish to know of this situation." Lucy beamed. "Thank you, Your Grace. Father said you'd be different, that you might actually listen." "Different from whom?" Violet asked carefully. Lucy hesitated before answering. "There was talk some years back of His Grace possibly marrying another lady. She visited the Abbey once, treated us villagers like we were invisible." She blushed. "Forgive me, I've spoken out of turn." "Not at all," Violet assured her, intrigued by this new information. "I appreciate your candor, Miss Caldwell." After Lucy departed, Violet found herself drawn to the conservatory. As she surveyed the space, planning its revival, the gardener, an elderly man named Wilkins, appeared with several catalogues of seeds and bulbs. "His Grace instructed me to assist you, Your Grace," he explained, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Said the conservatory was to be your domain entirely." As they discussed possibilities for the space, Wilkins gradually revealed himself to be a treasure trove of information about the Ashcombe family. He had served at the Abbey for over 40 years, having started as a boy under the 5th Duke. "The late Duke and Duchess, they were fine people," he reminisced, "always kind, even to the lowest stable boy. Their deaths hit young Master Henry hard. Changed him, it did." "How so?" Violet asked, keeping her tone casual as she examined a catalogue of exotic ferns. "He was a bright lad, always laughing, always asking questions about the plants. After the accident, he went away to school, and when he came back for holidays, he was different, quieter, more serious." Wilkins sighed. "The title came to him too young, if you ask me." Violet nodded sympathetically. "And in recent years, I understand he was particularly withdrawn after returning from London some 5 years ago." Wilkins's hands stilled on the trowel he was holding. "That would be after the business with Lady Blackwood," he said, then immediately looked stricken. "Forgive me, Your Grace, I shouldn't speak of such things." "Lady Blackwood?" Violet echoed, unable to contain her curiosity. Wilkins shifted uncomfortably. "It's not my place, Your Grace." "I understand," Violet assured him. "Thank you for your assistance with the conservatory plans." That evening, Henry returned from his estate inspections in an unusually contemplative mood. As they dined, he shared his observations about improvements needed for several tenant cottages and his plans to introduce new farming methods in the spring. "I also encountered Miss Caldwell on the road," he mentioned, watching Violet carefully. "She was most enthusiastic about having met the new Duchess." Violet maintained a serene expression. "She seems a dedicated young woman. She mentioned concerns about the village school building." "Did she?" Henry's brow furrowed. "Bradford has not brought this to my attention." "Perhaps he thought it a minor matter," Violet suggested, "though from Miss Caldwell's description, the conditions sound rather dire, especially with winter approaching." Henry nodded thoughtfully. "I shall investigate personally tomorrow." He hesitated before adding, "Would you care to accompany me to the village? It would give you an opportunity to become acquainted with the community." Violet brightened at the invitation. "I should like that very much." As servants cleared the dishes, Henry surprised her further by suggesting, "Perhaps we might retire to the library. There is a first edition of Linnaeus I thought might interest you." In the library, they settled into comfortable chairs before the fire, the promised volume open between them. As Violet admired the exquisite botanical illustrations, she gathered her courage to broach the subject that had occupied her thoughts all day. "Henry," she began carefully, "may I ask you something rather personal?" He stiffened slightly but nodded. "You may ask. I cannot promise to answer. Who is Lady Blackwood?" The effect was immediate. Henry's face drained of colour, and his hand, which had been reaching to turn a page, froze in mid-air. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "Where did you hear that name?" "It was mentioned in passing," Violet replied, unwilling to implicate Wilkins. "I gathered she was someone of significance to you." Henry rose abruptly, moving to stand before the fireplace, his back to her. The line of his shoulders was rigid with tension. "She is no one of consequence," he said finally. "A mistake from my past, best forgotten." "She hurt you," Violet observed softly, not a question but a statement. Henry turned, his eyes flashing with a pain so raw it took Violet's breath away. "You wish to know? Very well. Lady Sophia Blackwood was the woman to whom I was once engaged. The woman I believed loved me until I discovered she merely loved the prospect of becoming a duchess." "What happened?" Violet asked gently. "I found her in the arms of the Marquis of Westmoreland, a man whose fortune far exceeded my own at that time." His laugh was bitter. She explained quite pragmatically that while a dukedom was prestigious, Westmoreland could offer her the lavish lifestyle she desired. She had not realized the Ravencrest finances were compromised when our engagement was announced. Violet winced at the betrayal. "When was this?" 5 years ago. I had spent the preceding years rebuilding the family fortune after my uncle's mismanagement during my minority. By the time I met Sophia, our finances were recovering, but not yet restored to their former glory. His mouth twisted. She abandoned a dukedom for ready money. Quite the mercenary. Where is she now? Violet asked. In Italy, I believe. Westmoreland married the daughter of a wealthy industrialist instead. Sophia found herself neither a marchioness nor financially secure. He shook his head. But enough of this unpleasantness. It is in the past. Violet stood, moving to his side. Is it? Or does her ghost still haunt these halls? And your heart? Henry looked down at her, his expression guarded. What would you have me say, Violet? That I was a fool? I freely admit it. That I allowed one woman's betrayal to harden me against all sentiment? Perhaps I did. And now, Violet asked, her heart pounding, do you still believe all women to be as calculating as Lady Blackwood? No, he admitted after a long pause. Not all women. Their eyes met, and Violet saw something shift in his gaze, a softening, a warmth that had not been there before. Instinctively, she reached out, placing her hand lightly on his arm. I am not Sophia Blackwood, she said quietly. I did not marry you for your fortune or your title. You married me to save your family, he reminded her, though without rancor. Yes, she acknowledged. But I remain with you by choice, Henry, and I would know the man behind the title, the man who cares about factory children and village schools, who remembers small details about writing desks and botanical interests, who plays Chopin in the darkness. That man intrigues me far more than any fortune could. Henry's breath caught. Slowly, hesitantly, he raised his hand to touch her cheek. Violet, he murmured, her name a question and a prayer. The library door burst open, shattering the moment. Your Grace, exclaimed Mr. Bradford, breathless and dishevelled. Forgive the intrusion, but there's a fire in the north wing. Henry sprang into action immediately, all vulnerability vanishing beneath the mask of ducal authority. Alert the staff. Form a bucket brigade from the well. Violet, remain here where it's safe. I will do no such thing, she countered, already moving toward the door. I can help. Henry looked as if he might argue, then nodded sharply. Stay with Mrs. Wilson. Help evacuate the staff, if necessary. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. The fire, fortunately, was contained to a single unused chamber in the north wing, quickly brought under control by the efficient response of the household staff and stable hands. As dawn broke, Henry found Violet in the great hall, distributing tea and blankets to the exhausted servants who had fought the blaze. Her face was smudged with soot, her hair falling from its pins, but her calm efficiency had not wavered throughout the crisis. You should rest, he told her, his own face streaked with smoke and sweat. You've done more than enough. As have you, she replied, noting the way he favored his right arm. You're hurt. A minor burn, he dismissed. Bradford has already seen to it. Let me see, Violet insisted, gently taking his arm and examining the bandage visible beneath his torn sleeve. You should not have entered the chamber yourself. It was too dangerous. I had to be certain no one was trapped, he replied. Then, more quietly, that wing holds difficult memories. Violet's eyes met his, understanding dawning. Sophia. He nodded grimly. The north suite was prepared for her before our engagement ended. I ordered it sealed afterward. No one has entered it since until tonight. Do they know what caused the fire? Violet asked. Henry's expression darkened. Bradford believes it was deliberately set. A lamp broken on the floor. Oil spread strategically. Who would do such a thing? Violet gasped. I intend to find out, Henry replied, his voice hard. But first, you need rest. I shall have a bath prepared for you. As they climbed the grand staircase together, Henry suddenly stopped, turning to face her. You were magnificent tonight, he said softly. Most women of your station would have swooned at the first sign of danger. Violet smiled tiredly. I am not most women, remember? No, he agreed, his eyes warming as they had in the library before the interruption. You are extraordinary, Violet Ashcombe. In that moment, as they stood on the staircase of his ancestral home, surrounded by the aftermath of danger, something fundamental shifted between them. Henry reached for her hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture that was no longer merely formal, but filled with genuine admiration. Rest well, my Duchess, he murmured against her fingers. We shall speak more later. The investigation into the fire revealed little. No strangers had been observed near the abbey, and all staff were accounted for during the critical hours. Henry increased security around the estate, but remained troubled. Perhaps it was simply an accident, Violet suggested, as they rode together through the estate the following afternoon. An animal could have knocked over an old lamp. Perhaps, Henry conceded, though he sounded unconvinced. The north wing shall be properly cleaned and restored now. There is no sense in maintaining a shrine to the past. Violet glanced at him, noting the new resolve in his profile. You are ready to move forward, then? His eyes met hers, steady and clear. I believe I am, with your help. They had reached the village, where curious residents emerged from cottages and shops to glimpse their Duke and new Duchess. Henry dismounted, then lifted Violet from her saddle with strong, sure hands that lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. The schoolhouse inspection confirmed Lucy Caldwell's assessment. The building was in deplorable condition, with a sagging roof and draughty windows. Henry frowned as he examined the structure, his displeasure evident. This is unacceptable, he declared to the schoolmaster, Lucy's father. Repairs should have been made years ago. Bradford has been negligent. Perhaps not negligent, Your Grace, Mr. Caldwell suggested diplomatically, but overwhelmed. Since you've been less involved in estate matters, he's shouldered many responsibilities. Henry accepted the gentle rebuke with grace. You are right, of course. The fault is ultimately mine. I assure you, that will change. The school shall be repaired before the first snow falls. As they toured the village, Violet observed Henry's interaction with his tenants and villagers. Though still reserved, he listened attentively to their concerns, addressing each person by name and demonstrating a surprising familiarity with their families and circumstances. You know them well, she commented, as they departed the village bakery, where Henry had inquired after the baker's ailing mother. I grew up alongside many of them, he replied. Before I became the Duke, I was simply Henry to them. A shadow crossed his face. After Sophia, I withdrew from much of estate life. I see now that was a mistake. It is never too late to begin anew, Violet said softly. He smiled down at her, a real smile that transformed his features. No, it is not. That evening, as Violet sat at her dressing table, Betsy brushing out her hair for the night, a knock came at the connecting door between her chambers and Henry's. Come in, she called, her pulse quickening. Henry entered, dressed in his dressing gown. He dismissed Betsy with a nod, waiting until the maid had departed before speaking. I have been thinking, he began, pacing before the fireplace, about what you said, about beginning anew. Violet turned on her stool to face him, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. Yes, I have not been a proper husband to you, he said, his voice low and intent. Nor have I been a proper steward to my estate and people. In both cases, I allowed past wounds to dictate my actions, or rather my inaction. You were hurt, Violet said gently. Hearts do not heal overnight. No, but neither should they remain frozen indefinitely. He moved closer, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. You have shown me that, Violet. With your warmth, your courage, your unfailing kindness, you have reminded me of the man I once was, the man I might still become. Violet's breath caught as he knelt before her, taking her hands in his. What are you saying, Henry? I am saying that I wish to begin again. With you, with my responsibilities, with life itself. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. I cannot promise you love, not yet, but I can promise to try, to open myself to the possibility. Tears welled in Violet's eyes. That is all I ask. Henry reached up, his fingers trembling slightly as they brushed a tear from her cheek. May I kiss you, Duchess? Not as a duty, not as a performance for society, but as a man kissing the woman who has begun to thaw his frozen heart? Yes, Violet whispered, leaning toward him. Their lips met in a kiss unlike their first, tender yet passionate, tentative yet promising. Henry's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened, awakening feelings Violet had scarcely dared to acknowledge. When they finally parted, both breathless, Henry rested his forehead against hers. I should go, he murmured, though he made no move to release her. This is all still very new. Violet nodded, understanding his need for caution. But you will return tomorrow. His eyes, so long guarded, now shone with unmistakable warmth. Yes, Violet. I will return, and perhaps—" He glanced toward the connecting door. Perhaps it need not remain closed between us much longer. As he rose to leave, Violet caught his hand. "Good night, Henry." He bent to press a final kiss to her fingers. "Good night, my Violet. Sleep well." As the door closed behind him, Violet touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss. The Duke of Ice was melting at last, revealing the man of passion and principle beneath, and Violet found herself falling deeper under his spell with each passing day. The late autumn rains came to Derbyshire, transforming the landscape into a tapestry of golds and russets beneath pewter skies. Within Ashcroft Abbey, however, a different transformation was underway, one marked by quiet conversations before the library fire, shared smiles across the dinner table, and increasingly frequent moments when the Duke and Duchess could be found together, engrossed in each other's company. The conservatory project had become their joint passion. Henry surprised Violet with rare specimens ordered from the finest nurseries in Europe, while she designed the layout to create a haven of beauty and tranquility. Together they worked alongside Wilkins, planting and arranging, their hands often brushing in the rich soil. "My mother would have adored you," Henry remarked one afternoon as they positioned a delicate orchid in its new home. She had a similar determination to create beauty wherever she went. Violet glanced up, pleased by the comparison, and by how freely Henry now spoke of his parents. "Tell me more about her." "She was Italian by birth, the daughter of a Florentine count. My father met her during his grand tour and fell hopelessly in love. His family objected, of course. They had a suitable English heiress selected for him." Henry smiled at the memory. But father was resolute. He declared he would renounce the title if necessary. "How romantic," Violet said, genuinely touched. "Indeed. Fortunately, my grandfather eventually relented when he met her. No one could resist Isabella's charm for long." Henry's expression grew wistful. "She brought music and laughter to these ancient halls. After she died, the silence was deafening." Violet reached across the planter, covering his soil-stained hand with her own. "Perhaps it's time to fill these halls with music again." That evening, Henry led Violet to the music room, where the pianoforte had been newly tuned. As rain lashed against the windows, he played for her. Not the melancholy pieces of before, but vibrant sonatas that spoke of hope and renewal. Later, as they sat together on the instrument's bench, Henry's arm around her waist, Violet asked the question that had been forming in her mind. "Henry, what truly happened in the North Wing? Not just with Sophia, but there seems to be more pain associated with that place than a broken engagement would explain." He was silent for so long that Violet feared she had overstepped. Then slowly he began to speak. "The night my parents died, they had quarreled. It was unusual for them. They were devoted to each other. But father had received a letter that upset him greatly. They argued in the north drawing room, where I was not supposed to be, but I had crept in through the adjoining study to retrieve a book." Henry's fingers absently played a melancholy chord. "I overheard father accuse my Uncle Richard of embezzling estate funds. Mother urged caution, suggesting they seek legal counsel before confronting him publicly. Father was adamant. Richard had betrayed the family trust and would be held accountable." "Your uncle?" Violet asked, surprised. "The same who arranged our marriage?" Henry nodded grimly. "The very same. They left for Scotland the next morning, a journey my uncle had encouraged, supposedly to give father time to cool his temper. Their carriage never reached its destination. The implication hung in the air between them." Violet gasped softly. "You believe it was not an accident?" "I had suspicions, even as a boy," Henry admitted, "but I had no proof. By the time I came of age, the trail was cold. And Richard had indeed depleted much of the family fortune during my minority, legally through unwise investments and extravagant living, though the result was the same." "Is that why you worked so hard to restore the estates?" "Partly," Henry acknowledged, "but also to prove myself worthy of my father's legacy. He was an exceptional steward of both land and people." "As are you," Violet said firmly. "The tenants speak of you with great respect." Henry's expression softened. "If that is true, it is a recent development, one I owe largely to your influence." "And the North Wing?" Violet prompted gently. "What of Sophia?" Henry's jaw tightened. "After our engagement, I brought Sophia to the Abbey. I wanted to show her the place that would be her home, to share my dreams for our future together. I had the north wing renovated for her specifically. She had expressed a preference for those rooms because of their views. He rose from the bench, moving to stare out at the rain-lashed darkness. The night before she was to leave, I was restless. I went to the library, thinking to read until I grew tired. Instead, I overheard voices from the adjoining parlor, Sophia and my Uncle Richard. Violet felt a chill of foreboding. What were they saying? Richard was advising her to break the engagement, Henry said, his voice flat. He told her my finances were still precarious, that I had borrowed heavily to create the illusion of prosperity. He suggested Westmoreland as a more suitable match, a man whose fortune was secure. That's despicable, Violet exclaimed. Did you confront them? Not immediately. I wanted to hear Sophia's response. His laugh was hollow. She was concerned only about whether the diamond necklace I had given her would need to be returned. Richard assured her it could be considered a gift, separate from the engagement. Violet rose, going to his side. Oh, Henry. The next day, I found them together in the north drawing room, the very place where I had overheard my parents' last argument. Sophia was in Westmoreland's arms. When confronted, she was unapologetic, said she could not tie herself to a man whose fortunes might collapse at any moment. And your uncle's role? He claimed he was merely looking out for Sophia's interests and mine. Suggested I was too young to make such a commitment. Henry's expression hardened. I ordered them all from my home that day. The north wing was closed, and I returned to London, determined to build a fortune so vast that no one would ever question my solvency again. And you succeeded, Violet observed, yet the victory brought you little joy. Until now, Henry said quietly, turning to face her. His eyes, once so cold, now burned with intensity. Until you. He reached for her, drawing her into his arms. Violet went willingly, her heart racing as his lips found hers in a kiss that spoke of long-banked passion finally unleashed. His hands tangled in her hair, cradling her head as if she were something infinitely precious. When they finally parted, both breathless, Henry rested his forehead against hers. I have been a fool, Violet, allowing the past to poison my present, seeing betrayal where there was only loyalty, rejecting connection when it was the very thing I needed most. Not a fool, she corrected gently, merely a man who was deeply wounded. A wound you have begun to heal, he murmured, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. I never thought to feel this way again, to trust, to hope, to... He hesitated, as if the word still frightened him. To love? Violet supplied, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Henry admitted, vulnerability and wonder mingling in his gaze. I believe I am falling in love with you, Violet Ashcombe. Against all my careful plans and protective walls, you have claimed my heart. Joy bloomed within Violet's chest, bright and overwhelming. And you have claimed mine, Henry. I think perhaps you had it from the moment you spoke honestly in my conservatory, all those months ago. Their second kiss was deeper, a sealing of unspoken promises. When Henry finally drew back, his eyes were dark with desire and newfound tenderness. Come, he said, taking her hand. There is something I wish to show you. He led her through the Abbey's corridors to the north wing. The fire damage had been repaired, the rooms cleaned and aired, though they remained sparsely furnished. I've been coming here each day, Henry explained, guiding her into what had once been the north drawing room. Confronting the ghosts, you might say. The room was transformed from the last time Violet had glimpsed it during the fire. Fresh paint brightened the walls, new curtains hung at the windows, and a single portrait dominated the space above the mantelpiece. Henry's parents, their faces alight with joy and mutual adoration. It was in storage, Henry explained, following her gaze to the painting. I could never bear to display it after they died. It reminded me too much of what I had lost. And now? Violet asked. Now it reminds me of what is possible, he replied, drawing her close. The love they shared, real, enduring love. It wasn't a fairy tale. It existed. It can exist again. Violet's heart soared at his words. Yes, it can. I want to fill these rooms with new memories, Henry continued. Happy ones. I thought perhaps a nursery someday. The implication made Violet blush even as her pulse quickened. I would like that very much. Henry's expression grew serious. There is one more matter we must address. My Uncle Richard. Violet tensed. You believe he was involved in your parents' deaths? I cannot prove it, Henry said grimly, but I have my suspicions. And now, with the fire in this very wing, he shook his head. It may be mere coincidence. Or it may not, Violet finished. When did you last see him? At our wedding. He seemed displeased by my choice of bride. I assumed it was mere snobbery. The Everleigh fortune is diminished, after all. His eyes narrowed. But perhaps it was something else. Perhaps he feared you would influence me in ways he did not anticipate. Such as reopening this wing? Becoming more involved in the estate? Violet suggested. Examining old records? Henry nodded slowly. Precisely. The estate books for the period immediately following my parents' deaths, they've gone missing from the steward's office. Bradford has been searching for weeks. A cold realization dawned on Violet. The fire, it wasn't just about Sophia, was it? You think something was hidden in the north wing, something that might implicate Richard? I do, Henry confirmed, and I intend to find it. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to Ashcroft Abbey. As Violet descended the grand staircase, she heard raised voices from the entrance hall. I assure you, Lord Richard, His Grace is not receiving visitors today, insisted Phillips, the butler, his usual composure strained. Nonsense. I am his uncle and trustee. I need no invitation, retorted a sharp voice that Violet recognized from their wedding, Lord Richard Ashcombe. And I am his wife, Violet announced, sweeping into the hall with all the dignity of her position. Good morning, Lord Richard. This is an unexpected pleasure. Richard Ashcombe, a leaner, greyer version of his late brother, regarded Violet with barely concealed disdain. Beside him stood a striking woman of perhaps 40, her blonde hair artfully arranged beneath an expensive bonnet. Duchess, Richard acknowledged stiffly. May I present Lady Sophia Blackwood, recently returned from the continent. Violet felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her feet. This was Henry's former fiancée, the woman who had broken his heart and helped drive him into isolation, yet she maintained her composure, inclining her head with cool politeness. Lady Blackwood, how unexpected. I was given to understand you resided in Italy. Until recently, Sophia replied, her voice musical yet somehow false. The climate disagreed with me. When I learned of dear Henry's marriage, I felt I simply must return to offer my congratulations in person. How thoughtful, Violet replied, noting the calculating gleam in the woman's eyes. His Grace is inspecting the tenant farms this morning, but should return for luncheon. Perhaps you would care to wait in the drawing room. As Phillips escorted the visitors away, Violet immediately dispatched a stable boy to find Henry. Whatever game Richard and Sophia were playing, she would not face them alone. Henry returned within the hour, his expression thunderous as he strode into the library where Violet waited. Is it true? He demanded without preamble. Sophia is here? With my uncle? Violet rose, going to him. Yes. They arrived unannounced about an hour ago. Henry, I believe they mean mischief. His jaw tightened as he took her hands. Of course they do. Richard has always resented my independence. And Sophia, he shook his head in disgust. Westmoreland married another, as I told you. She must be desperate to have returned to England, and to have aligned herself with Richard. What shall we do? Violet asked. Henry's eyes met hers, resolute and clear. We shall meet them together as Duke and Duchess. Whatever scheme they have concocted, they shall find us united against it. In the drawing room, Richard and Sophia rose as Henry and Violet entered, arm in arm. Violet noted how Sophia's eyes widened slightly at the evident closeness between husband and wife. Nephew, Richard began, his tone falsely hearty, you're looking well. Marriage clearly agrees with you. Uncle, Henry acknowledged coolly. Lady Blackwood, this is an unexpected visit. Sophia moved forward, offering her hand with practiced grace. Henry, darling, how wonderful to see you again, and in your ancestral home, just as we once planned. Henry ignored her outstretched hand. What brings you to Derbyshire, Sophia? I doubt it was concern for my marital happiness. A flash of anger crossed her perfect features before she composed herself. So direct as always. Very well. I've come because I've had time to reflect on my hasty decision. I realize now I made a terrible mistake. Several, I should think, Henry replied dryly. I was young and foolish, Sophia continued, her voice taking on a pleading quality. I allowed myself to be influenced by others. Her gaze slid meaningfully toward Richard, who stiffened. I have regretted it ever since. Violet watched the performance with growing indignation. The woman's insincerity was as transparent as glass. "What exactly do you want, Lady Blackwood?" she asked directly. Sophia's mask slipped momentarily, revealing irritation at the interruption. "I merely wish to make amends, to explain myself to Henry. To both of you, of course." "An explanation 5 years delayed," Henry observed, "coincidentally arriving just as my wife and I begin examining the estate records from the period following my parents' deaths." Richard stepped forward, his face flushing. "What are you implying, Henry? Surely you're not still harboring childish suspicions about your parents' accident?" "I imply nothing, Uncle. I merely find the timing curious." Henry's gaze hardened. "As I find it curious that the North Wing suffered a fire shortly after I mentioned to Bradford my intention to thoroughly review all estate documentation from my minority." A tense silence fell. Sophia glanced uncertainly between Richard and Henry, clearly not having anticipated this turn in the conversation. "I think," Violet said into the silence, "that Lady Blackwood's presence here is a distraction. The real question is what you fear we might discover, Lord Richard." Richard's face contorted with anger. "How dare you? I have served this family faithfully for decades. I guided this estate through difficult times while this ungrateful boy was still learning his letters." "And helped yourself to its resources in the process," Henry countered. "Bradford has found discrepancies in the accounts, significant ones. Funds diverted to mysterious investments that yielded nothing for the estate, but somehow enriched you personally." "Lies and slander," Richard sputtered. "Then you will not object to a full audit," Violet suggested calmly, "by independent solicitors from London." Richard paled visibly. "This is outrageous. I will not be questioned like a common thief in a house where I was once master." "Acting master," Henry corrected coldly, "and that time has long passed. As for you, Lady Blackwood, whatever Richard promised you in exchange for this pathetic attempt to disrupt my marriage, I suggest you reconsider your position. The Duchess and I are not so easily manipulated." Sophia's beautiful face hardened into ugly lines. "You always were too clever for your own good, Henry. Richard said you'd be blinded by a pretty face and a convenient title, but I knew better." She turned to Violet with undisguised contempt. "Enjoy your victory, Duchess. But remember, you were not his first choice." "No," Violet agreed serenely. "I was his best choice, something you could never have been." Henry moved to stand beside his wife, his hand finding hers in a gesture of united strength. "You have outstayed your welcome, both of you. Phillips will show you out." As Richard and Sophia departed, their scheme in tatters, Henry turned to Violet, his expression softening from granite to warmth. "You were magnificent," he said, drawing her into his arms. "My brave, brilliant Duchess." "We were magnificent together," she corrected, resting her head against his chest. "Do you think they will trouble us again?" "Richard may try," Henry acknowledged, "but he has lost his power over me, over us. Whatever evidence he sought to destroy in the fire, I will find it, and if it proves his involvement in my parents' deaths, he will face justice at last." That evening, as twilight cloaked the abbey in shadow, Violet stood before the window in her chamber, gazing out at the mist-shrouded grounds. The day's confrontation had left her drained yet strangely exhilarated. They had faced Henry's past together and emerged stronger. A soft knock at the connecting door heralded Henry's arrival. He entered, still in his evening attire, though he had discarded his jacket and cravat. "Are you well?" he asked, coming to stand behind her at the window. "Today was challenging." Violet leaned back against him, sighing as his arms encircled her waist. "I am well. Better than well, in truth." "Oh?" He pressed a kiss to her temple. "How so?" She turned in his embrace to face him. "Because today I saw the last of your walls crumble, Henry. You stood against your past, against those who sought to manipulate you, and you did so as the man you truly are, not the Duke of Ice, but Henry Ashcombe, a man of honor, courage, and deep feeling." Henry gazed down at her, his dark eyes luminous in the fading light. "If I am that man, it is because you helped me find him again, Violet. You saw beyond my defenses from the very beginning." "I saw a man worth knowing," she replied simply. "Worth loving." His breath caught at her words. "I do not deserve you," he murmured, his fingers tracing the delicate curve of her cheek. "But I am profoundly grateful for you, nonetheless." "You deserve happiness, Henry," Violet insisted. "We both do." He smiled, a true smile that transformed his features, erasing the last vestiges of the cold mask he had worn for so long. "And are you happy, my Duchess?" "Almost completely," she answered, her eyes meeting his with unmistakable meaning. Henry's gaze darkened with desire. "Almost?" Violet's heart raced as she gathered her courage. "There remains one aspect of our marriage we have yet to fully explore," she whispered, her cheeks warming. Understanding dawned in Henry's eyes, followed by a tenderness that took her breath away. "Violet," he said, his voice low and reverent, "I would never press you—" "You are not pressing," she interrupted gently. "I am offering. I want to be your wife in every sense, Henry. I want us to truly begin our life together, not as strangers bound by duty, but as lovers bound by choice." Henry's control visibly wavered. "Are you certain?" In answer, Violet rose on tiptoes, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that conveyed everything words could not. With a groan, Henry gathered her closer, deepening the kiss as 5 months of restrained passion finally found release. Later, as moonlight spilled across the bedchamber, Henry traced idle patterns on Violet's bare shoulder, his expression one of wonderment. "I never imagined it could be like this," he confessed, "so perfect, so complete." Violet smiled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Nor did I. I thought myself incapable of love," Henry continued, his voice thoughtful in the darkness. "After Sophia's betrayal, I convinced myself it was a weakness I could not afford. But loving you—" He tilted her face up to his. "Loving you has made me stronger, not weaker. Braver, not more vulnerable. That is the paradox of true love," Violet replied softly. "It asks for surrender, yet grants us strength." Henry gathered her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I love you, Violet Ashcombe, with all that I am and all that I shall become. And I love you, Henry," she whispered back, "my Duke of Ice no longer." Dawn found them still entwined, reluctant to part even for sleep. As the first pale light filtered through the curtains, Henry propped himself on one elbow, gazing down at Violet with tenderness. "I have been thinking," he began, brushing a stray curl from her face, "about our future." "What of it?" she asked, reveling in the simple joy of waking beside him. "I want to restore the North Wing completely," he said. "Not as it was, but as something new. A place of light and music, as my mother would have wished." "I think that's a wonderful idea," Violet agreed. "Your parents would be proud of the man you've become, Henry." His expression grew serious. "There is more. I've decided to pursue the investigation into their deaths, regardless of where it leads. Richard must answer for his crimes if indeed he committed them. I shall stand with you," Violet promised. "Whatever you discover, whatever comes, we shall face it together." Henry brought her hand to his lips, kissing her palm with reverence. "Together," he agreed. "Always." The months that followed brought significant changes to Ashcroft Abbey and its master. Henry threw himself into estate improvements with newfound vigor, working closely with Bradford to modernize farming methods and improve conditions for tenants. The village school was not merely repaired, but rebuilt entirely, with Miss Lucy Caldwell appointed as assistant teacher, alongside her father. In London, the Ravencrest townhouse, once a sombre, formal place, became known for its intimate musical evenings and thoughtful discussions of social reform. Society matrons who had once whispered about the Duke of Ice now remarked on the transformation wrought by his vivacious young Duchess. The investigation into Lord Richard's financial dealings proved fruitful. With the assistance of Henry's solicitors, evidence of embezzlement during Henry's minority was uncovered, enough to force Richard's resignation from several prestigious clubs and his retreat to a modest property in Bath, his reputation in tatters. Though no definitive proof of his involvement in the tragic accident that claimed the 5th Duke and Duchess was found, a former stable hand came forward with testimony that Richard had paid to have the carriage tampered with. Evidence circumstantial, but damning enough that Richard dared not show his face in society again. As for Lady Sophia Blackwood, she departed for the continent once more, her schemes of reclaiming Henry's affections thoroughly dashed. Rumors placed her in Vienna, attempting to charm an aging Austrian count. A pursuit met with limited success. Spring arrived at Ashcroft Abbey in a riot of colour and renewal. The restored conservatory bloomed with exotic specimens from around the world, becoming Violet's pride and joy. The north wing, completely renovated, now housed a magnificent music room where Henry played nightly, his skill increasing with practice. On a perfect May morning, Henry found Violet in the conservatory, tending to a particularly delicate orchid. She looked up as he entered, her face glowing with happiness that still took his breath away. "Good morning, husband," she greeted him, setting aside her gardening tools. "You're up early." "I could not sleep," he admitted, drawing her into his arms. Too many thoughts running through my mind. Concern flickered across her features. Troubling thoughts. Quite the opposite. He smiled, brushing a kiss against her temple. "I was thinking of the future, our future." Violet's expression softened. As was I. Henry raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what were your thoughts, my love?" A mysterious smile curved her lips as she took his hand, guiding it to rest against her still flat abdomen. "I was thinking that Ashcroft Abbey might echo with the patter of small feet by Christmas." For a moment, Henry stood frozen, disbelief and joy warring on his face. "Violet," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you certain?" She nodded, tears of happiness shimmering in her eyes. "Dr. Bennett confirmed it yesterday. We are to have a child, Henry." With a laugh of pure delight, Henry lifted her into his arms, spinning her in a circle that sent sunlight dancing through her chestnut curls. "A child," he repeated in wonder. "Our child." As he set her gently on her feet, his expression grew tender, almost reverent. "You have given me everything, Violet. A reason to open my heart again, a home filled with warmth instead of shadows, and now, a family of our own. We have given these things to each other," she corrected gently, cupping his face between her palms. "That is the beauty of what we've found, Henry. Neither of us is complete without the other." He covered her hands with his own, turning to press a kiss to each palm. "When I think of how close I came to refusing this marriage," he marveled. "How determined I was to remain alone, frozen in my bitterness. And I," Violet admitted, "how frightened I was to marry a man they called the Duke of Ice. How certain I was that our union would be nothing but cold duty." Henry smiled, drawing her close once more. "How wrong we both were." "Gloriously wrong," she agreed, rising on tiptoes to meet his kiss. As sunshine streamed through the glass walls of the conservatory, illuminating the couple in its golden embrace, the last whispers of old ghosts faded from Ashcroft Abbey. In their place bloomed new life, new hope, and a love that had defied all expectations, transforming a marriage of convenience into a union of souls. The Duke of Ice had found his heart at last, melted by the unwavering warmth of the woman who had dared to see beyond his frozen facade. And Lady Violet Everley, who had entered his household as a duty, remained as his greatest joy, proving that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the most unlikely circumstances. Outside the conservatory windows, spring unfurled across the Derbyshire hills, mirroring the renewal within, and within the ancient walls of Ashcroft Abbey the future beckoned, bright with promise, rich with possibility, and warmed by the enduring flame of a love that had transformed them both. The end. Dear listener, sometimes life doesn't unfold the way we once dreamed. We face disappointments, we carry heartaches, and we live through seasons of silence. But just like the Duke and Violet, we learn that it is never too late. Not too late to begin again, not too late to be seen for who we truly are, not too late to be loved, not with pity, but with depth, respect, and kindness. You have walked long roads. You have endured more than most will ever know. And tonight, you deserve rest. Not just sleep, but the kind of rest that reaches the soul and whispers, "You are safe now, you are held, you have done enough." May this night wrap around you like a warm blanket. May your heart beat in peace. And may you wake tomorrow knowing that your story still matters, because you still matter. With all our gratitude, Legends of the Fall team. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If this story moved you, Please consider subscribing to our channel, liking the video, leaving a heartfelt comment, and sharing it with someone who loves stories full of emotion and transformation. Your support means the world to us, truly, from the bottom of our hearts. It's what keeps us motivated to keep telling stories filled with love, redemption, and unforgettable twists. At the end of this video, you'll see a new story suggestion from our channel. Click it and be surprised by another emotional tale that might touch your soul just like this one. With affection, The Legends of the Fall Team,